what's going on? Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Spin the Rack. I'm here with my boys, Kyle and P. Say what's up, gents.
What up?
Today, ready to rock. How's everybody doing?
Today, we got some controversy. Jim Shooter, the man himself, former editor supremo of Marvel, is going to drop some, some tea in the upcoming Heavy Metal magazine that's going to come out in December. And so here, I brought the boys together to talk a little bit more about this. Like, why would Jim Shooter say he wants to drop some information about what was going on in the industry and Marvel? You know, he's had a very, let's say, controversial past working at Marvel, Valiant, and Dark Horse as time has gone by. But here, I'm going to put on a resident expert himself, P himself. P, can you give us a little bit more about what's your thought on this whole, supposedly he's going to be dropping a lot of tea or information or controversy in this magazine article, because he's going to spill all the beans. What that means for him, is it just a cash grab just to get people to buy the magazine, or is it like, you know, something that he's trying to air some grievances since what had happened in the past? So P, I'm passing this off to you.
Well, I think Shooter is always a good interview. So it's not anything that, you know, that's not going to have some buzz, at least as far as comic book fans or comic historians. And he also has a past that's a celebrated past, that he started writing comics when he was 13, writing Superman and Superman related comic books, being, you know, besides writing Superman and creating, I think, Parasite, he did a lot of work on the Legion of Superheroes, which gained him, like, the Legion fandom was very big at that time, and he was just adding to it. I think they also, the death of Feral Lad, like classically trying to do this. He like took what Marvel was doing and was trying to fit it into DC stuff. But of course, the DC editors, they were very strong in their will, but they liked the stories. So he was doing DC stories with a little bit of a Marvel edge to them. So then at some point, I think he left DC because that was a very tough environment for him as a kid, and then at the same time he still was making money as far as doing stuff, and he became he left, but he came back some point later to do some more Legion, and then he ultimately left to be like an associate editor at Marvel. And then in Marvel, then no one really wanted Stan's job except for Roy Thomas, but those things didn't work out. So since they already went through everybody they possibly could, Jim Shooter was still there, and he took the reins. And ultimately, one of the first things that he did was try to get the books on time. Because Marvel had this thing where you'd see in Fantastic Four and Thor, they would reprint an old issue when they were like totally, you know, going to miss the deadline. And you'd get a Kirby issue or something like that. And he moved away. They had a lot of inventory issues to cover any late stories. And he also got basically the whole line, you know, on time. So Marvel also was something which was a success. So Marvel was still, I think comics were kind of said that they were gonna, you know, crash. The whole business was gonna be gone. And he, you know, with some other things like Star Wars, stuff that was implemented before him, the X-Men got big. There's a couple things that were happening before he got there that led to big success. And there were a couple things that happened while he was editor-in-chief that was within his tenure, which was like Byrne on the Fantastic Four, Miller on Daredevil, and just it felt like at some point that like Marvel was kind of righting the ship. You know, like the Hulk was, well, at that point in the 70s, the Hulk was always a success, so it was kind of, that was still always rolling. Spider-Man was kind of buzzing, so there was just a buzz around Marvel when Shooter. Now there was a pushback because there were a lot of the writer editors were like struggling, and these are the top guys like Roy Thomas, Ling Wen, Marv Wolfman. They were coming in conflict because he was kind of pulling the writer editor power away, and even the Doug Mensch, who was kind of struggling with some of the editorial stuff he was asking them to do. But ultimately, the writer editors went to DC, and then the Marvel guys were kind of just rolling. But then he started running into more controversy, not just outside of Marvel and then inside of Marvel, where he was very tough on all of the talent, even his top talents. The top books were getting, heavily, scrutinized and that sort of thing. And ultimately, some creators started leaving. Like, even though people don't remember it, Miller kind of was saying he was leaving Marvel at the same time Byrne left Marvel, and there were people starting to take notice. So then, when at some point he said something that got him in hot water with the higher ups, and I think Vince Colletta talked about it, but they weren't really ready to let him go. But they kind of finally got an impasse, and Shooter was gone. And there was a little bit of celebration from Walt Simonson and Chris Claremont. And then there was also another celebration at Byrne's house where the people infamously say they were trying to let off some steam to like take a cardboard cut at him and burn him in effigy, that sort of thing, which ultimately they were doing it for Mark Grunwald, but Mark Grunwald wasn't able to be there. So these stories are legendary now. They only remember the Byrne story now, but ultimately he left. He was down for, it seemed like he was down and out, but he came back with Valiant. A successful comic company.
He created it. Created it.
Well, he co-created with Bob Layton and some of his partners. But basically, they say a lot of the creative was his, so they give it all to him. But if you look on the inside, it says Bob Layton and him. So there's a lot of stuff that he created. Like, he had a big hand in creating all of that, but he did do it with his partners. But a lot of things attributed just to him. And ultimately, they pushed him out. They kind of pushed him out, and they kept going without him.
Why?
You know?
Why?
They don't have a specific thing. I think they just wanted, it seemed like there's a situation where he might have been done dirty, where it was rolling and they decided to move him out. It seemed like he was okay with the talent because they weren't doing flashy books. They were doing very, like low-key sort of books. They did have Barry Windsor Smith, but I think there's nothing, I had to go back through the history of it, but it could be a situation where they kind of just wrestled power from him. It wasn't a thing where he kind of ran them into the ground, but because he seemed like it was a very positive sort of thing for him. And then next, he was gone. And then you start to hear from, like Barry Windsor Smith was saying, well, maybe this wasn't all Shooter. Maybe it wasn't all him. So ultimately, after that, the companies that he did after that, he kind of got himself back into the thing of being that Shooter to kind of be the boat, like because he said when he was making Defiant that there are going to be only two comic companies left. It'll be Defiant and whoever. And then that kind of sent the comic pros into a frenzy. And ultimately that kind of fell apart, even though it had like talent like Chris Claremont was involved in Defiant for a little while, Steve Ditko, but he kind of bailed out because he didn't want to do a supernatural type of demon type of character. And then ultimately he did something with the people who do Broadway Video. He did Broadway Video, he did something with them, but that kind of fell apart. And then ultimately he was a high profile pro that would go around to the cons. He I'm not sure how he makes his money, but he seemed like he was pretty, doing well for himself. He always go to cons, speak about stuff. And then ultimately in the 2000s, there were interests to get him back and this is where we get back to where we're at. They wanted him back to do the last Avengers story and then the last Legion story. And then at some point, both of the top editors found out that nobody wanted him to be working for either DC or Marvel. Dark Horse did pick him to do some Valiant stuff when they got the license, but that ultimately kind of went away. But he did do some stuff for Dark Horse. And he did do a Legion thing a little bit later, but when he initially was asked to do it in the 2000s, there was some pushback at DC. So I think that covers most of the history. Unless, Cal, you want to add something?
So what's the
sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, I think that was pretty good. That was pretty good. The only thing I might chime in is the deal with Valiant, where that is probably the most nebulous period of history with Jim Shooter, because nobody really knows exactly why he was no longer with Valiant. And it's also like if Jim Shooter didn't have that time period with Valiant, and Valiant was doing really great with comic book readers overall. I heard nothing but good stuff about Valiant, that you need to start reading some of these books, and I put it off reading it. And then later on they were like, oh, Shooter's out. So after Shooter was out, I was like, okay, but I still never got around to it. And then like shortly after Shooter was out, I'm not sure how much time after Shooter was out, Valiant, pretty much, folded at the end of the day. But that right there is where Shooter still maintains like almost legendary status because he was at Marvel. He did all this stuff as a kid. Then he's the editor in chief. He's no longer there, and then he goes to Valiant and strikes gold right there again. So that's he definitely has a following, and it stems from that. I think more so than the Marvel stuff because that's more historic for people. The Valiant thing really showed that, or rather, for a lot of people, it shows that okay, this was the driving force behind a whole bunch of the things. Now, I don't know, I always lean towards a Shooter piss somebody off because with all the other stories, it's pretty much Shooter piss somebody off at the end of the day. Though that shouldn't take away from his, without a doubt, he's probably one of the top 10 comic book editors out there. Personality excluded. This is he's a very, very talented editor without a doubt. But then there's all this other stuff that you get with him at the end of the day. And some of those other guys are right up there because Mort Wessinger was tough. If these guys had a problem with Shooter, they would have melted on the Wessinger. Okay. Wessinger was literally there, like, put the pumps on, bitch. He had no problem with that whatsoever. He was like, I got to get the maximum out of these dudes. These guys are lazy, and I gotta ride these guys from sun up to sundown, or else they're gonna just be turning in some nonsense. Again, these are editors for comics at the end of the day. I'm glad we recorded that. That's a great history of Jim. That's a great synopsis or summary of Jim Shooter's history. That was excellent, Petey.
So thank you.
So what is the we know one of the greatest hits that he had was Secret Wars, and there's a quote that Jim Shooter, he was a very successful comic book writer. Excuse me?
Secret Wars is based on a bunch of toys. Okay? Secret Wars is based on a bunch of toys, and even when I was reading it as a kid, I realized this is not a very good story. It didn't make a whole bunch of sense. There's a whole bunch of stuff that went off there, but it was based on the toy series, and the kids just, for whatever reason, loved it because for a lot of them, this was their introduction into these characters. So they're like, oh, this is what these characters are like. And if you were reading the regular books, you'd be like, why is Thor acting like a jerk? Why didn't Professor Xavier do this? How the hell can Wolverine not take out Spider-Man with a quickness? So that's how they came in there. But his Legion of Superheroes run with DC, that's your classic right there. Though a lot of people won't go back to read it because it was Silver Age and they dismissed the Silver Age. But that's your classic run. That is, I think hands down, without a doubt, that is probably the best thing that he did in terms of writing. And then you have the editor stuff. But the Secret Wars stuff is always going to be seen as better because it's more, well, maybe not always seen as better, but without a doubt, it's more popular.
More successful. So, there are two quotes I wanted to bring into this that were from the Heat, from some people. I think three, actually. Let me put them on. They were highlighted in the Wikipedia. Do you want me to show that, or do you want me to just read it off, Petey?
You want to put it? Yeah, you want to read it or put it in your own words, whichever one you want to do.
Okay, so from Roy Thomas, this is what he said about him. When Jim Shooter took over, for better or worse, as the editor of Marvel, he decided to rein things in. He wanted stories that told the way that he wanted them told. And so Rob Thomas, remember, Roy Thomas was also the editor of Marvel. Several editors before him. When Jim Shooter took over, for better or worse, he decided to rein things in. Just as Petey was saying, he wanted stories told the way he wanted them told. It's not a matter of whether Jim Shooter was right or wrong. It's a matter of a different approach. He was editor-in-chief and had a right to impose what he wanted to. I thought it was kind of dumb, but I don't think Jim was dumb. I think the approach was wrong. I don't think it really helped anything. So that's just a snippet that we got from Shooter. John Romita Sr. said,
before you go to that, I think one of the things that he, like a lot of creators, struggle with was, I think Doug Moench was the first to say that they would replace like a character like Thor and have someone else get the hammer. And he said we could probably do that for all the Marvel characters. And then like the writers were like, what is he thinking about? Like there was stuff like that. There was also, I think it's confirmed that I think Stern and Burns Captain America, they had a 3-part story, and then Shooter said you can't do any more 3-part stories. Many people pushed back. Stern has said some things, but Stern was the first to go, and Byrne was kind of the one that said, well, if he's leaving, then I'm going to go. And I think, who's that, Frank Miller also confirmed that. And the editor, Jim Salicrup, they also said that Shooter had put in this thing where it was only, you couldn't do 3-parters, unless it was like the first Galactus story or something like that. So these type of editorial things that he's thrown in.
Right. Yeah, and you have like there's a thing by John Byrne which said Shooter came along just when Marvel needed him. He stayed too long, having fixed just about everything that was wrong. He could not stop fixing. Around the time I left to do Superman, that's John Byrne, I said I thought Shooter and Dick Giordano should trade jobs. It was DC that needed fixing then, and do so about every 5 years or so. Shooter had put Marvel into a place where all that was needed was a kindly father figure at the helm, and that was not Shooter. Secret Wars was when the trouble really kicked into high gear.
Hell yeah.
And Romita also kind of seconded this, where he said Shooter had been great for the first 2 or 3 years. He got the creative people treated with more respect, got us sent to conventions first class with our ways paid. We went through the world. We thought the world of him. Then his Secret Wars was a big hit. And after that, he decided he knew everything and he started changing everybody's stuff. So, I mean, he was a very successful editor for a while. He was an assistant editor when he came from DC, and he got comics on time. He got a lot of his series working. He did the Dazzler.
You got the creators' money. Don't talk about Dazzler. He's talked about how much more Dazzler has sold than Superman initially, but it tanked. So anything of saying it sold 400,000 and Superman was selling 150,000, that's the first couple of issues. And many people were upset that wasn't the blockbuster that it was supposed to be, that it was ultimately Dazzler. Even though the approach was very much like the way Spider-Man or the Marvel characters was, it still was Dazzler. So kind of girl on roller skates, which didn't meet the concept of Marvel. But the way that they took the approach to it was like a Marvel character, but it wasn't, the character design and everything to it wasn't there. So
yeah, but it's still hard to get a number one. It was hard to get a number one comic to beat Superman at that time. So
no, not at all.
At that time.
Okay, but let's not.
Hold on a second. Can you trying to run off? Trying to run off after saying that nonsense. Don't think you're trolling, right? Okay. Don't think. No. Did you ever read She from the Billy Tucci series from Crusade Comics?
No, didn't.
No. At one point, that was outselling Superman. Something new, and it's a nice flash. And again, I've heard guys say this before.
Oh yeah, she. Yeah, sorry. What am I talking about? Yes, I did read She.
Yeah, I read it. He had I thought that was okay. He had another one, Senryaku, that was much better at the end of the day. It was like prose. It was a prose story with splash pages. Much better. Very good story, but very good writing too. I don't think anything he did after that matched it. But that's besides the point. You've got a character like Superman who's been selling for 80 plus years. So the fact, when his 80-year career, you've actually outsold him at points to point, that's great. Okay, Superman's never been canceled. All right, Superman's been continuously published. So those are the numbers you have to contend with at the end of the day. So I expect that somebody will come in, be new, get hot, so on and so forth. But Dazzler, has been in volume. The only reason why Superman may be in volume number 3 or 4 is because they decided to reboot him. He's never been in danger of cancellation. That's the only character of comics who has never been in danger of cancellation. Batman was in danger of cancellation. They have to publish her or they lose the rights. Superman, that's not the case. So anytime you make those comparisons, always keep that in mind, hater.
And one thing
before you go to that, we also
before we go, I just wanted to make sure that some of the quotes that we got were from people who had difficult issues with Shooter at one point or another. Rob Thomas left.
Roy
Thomas. I'm thinking the singer, and so did John Byrne. Just to name a few.
Definitely, John Byrne. Most of the thing that people have issue with was him defending Shooter. Him saying he was happy to be a cog within Marvel. And they were saying, "Oh, company man," that sort of thing. He said, "Hey, Shooter got me He got me money when I was a little guy, and he got me money when I was a big guy, right? And he said many glowing things about Shooter up until the end.
He should, because he matched him with one of the greats, Chris Claremont.
He had no part in putting them together. No part. Chris Claremont called up Byrne to do Iron Fist because he needed someone to fill in for Pat Broderick, right? And then Byrne said the quote that he said, "Hey, they said I need it in 10 days," and Byrne said, "What am I going to do the next week?" And that's how the partnership happened. Chris Claremont trying to get the artist to work on this, seeing Byrne's work and liking it, and there were other people trying to get Marvel in. Now, when Marvel and DC decided. When Marvel decided they were going to hire him for regular stuff like Marvel Team Up, the editor-in-chief, which is Archie Goodwin, had Shooter call Byrne, but that was from his boss. And then with the X-Men, that was Archie Goodman saying, "Hey, if I can get the X-Men go monthly, if I get Byrne on it and I get him and Terry who did Star-Lord, maybe we'll have a hit if it goes monthly." And then they had Shooter call Byrne, but it wasn't Shooter. Shooter recently tried to say, "Hey, he didn't like me because I put him with Chris Claremont. I didn't do it. That was Archie." It's like he's never said that ever. But he constantly changed. That's what every time you hear the interview, he's good for an interview. There's like a 7-hour interview on the Comic Historian thing with him, and he just makes up. You made me go there. He makes up a lot of different things where we can fact check this stuff. So Byrne said a lot of positive things.
What about him putting Byrne on the Fantastic Four, right?
No, that's one of the things he put Byrne on as a writer.
No, but I'm saying he did some stuff. You know what I'm trying to say? So we're not trying to cut him down. I'm just saying we got to remember some of the successes.
And Byrne has said that he's appreciated him for that.
I'm not knocking Byrne. I'm just bringing up some of the things. This is not a Byrne conversation.
I'm saying that.
Frank Miller on Daredevil, okay? Walt Simonson on Thor, right?
He didn't do Walt Simonson on Thor. That's the editor. The editor, they didn't know. They would have kept Thor as it was. That there was nothing you could do. And then Mark Grunwald,
Don't pick it up.
Huh?
Don't pick it up.
Don't
do it, bro.
I didn't pick it up. Lord, listen to me.
What are you talking about?
Cal, you agree with me, so it don't matter.
Mark Grunwald, Thor was going, because Shooter wrote some of those issues in the three, like after I think Doug Moench stopped writing it. He wrote some of those issues between Moench's run around 300 and 337. So like they were at a loss to figure out what was going on with Thor. Mark Grunwald was like, "Hey, just do whatever you want with it," because he already knew they already had they gave him carte blanche just because they were like, it's already going to be canceled, but just do whatever you want. So that's a happy accident. And people had forgotten that Walter Simonson was a fan fave. When the kids found that this was a hit, they were like, "Who's this new guy?" And he was already doing Star Wars. He was doing Battlestar Galactica. He did Alien.
We're talking about Shooter. This is what we're talking about.
Shooter did not do anything for that. He put Byrne on Fantastic Four. He agreed to Frank Miller, who was untried. The other thing, Byrne was not really that tried as a writer, so you can say yes, he did the chance on. But I mean, come on, Byrne was hot at that time. It makes sense.
You can't give Jim Shooter credit for every good thing that happened.
Yes.
Okay. Some of the things he's up top. So there's some things that are going to be directly with his hand on them, like Secret Wars, and then there's other stuff. No, this has just happened, during his tenure, which ultimately, I mean, if you want to look at like a presidency, yeah, all the good stuff, you can take credit for it because this is a part of your tenure. But then you also got to take credit for this. You also got to, take your knocks for anything that doesn't necessarily work out, long term as well. I mean, that period, especially that Secret Wars period, like maybe not there. Before then, with especially around the time where you got Walt Simonson coming on to Thor, that's there's a lot of change in terms of the characters over more. There's a lot of stuff that changed. You got the new suit for Spider-Man. You got the whole thing with Beta Ray Bill coming in with Thor. The Hulk had Bruce Banner's intellect, and that's just literally some top level stuff. If you went with all the other books too, there was a whole bunch of stuff that they were trying out. And Marvel, I thought, did Rhodey was Iron Man at the time, So there's a lot of change at this point. And you do have to credit Shooter for allowing these guys to be as, because some guys would have shut that down real quickly, like, oh, what are you doing? But DC was well known for that. These people wanted, oh, let's try something new with Superman. Get the out of here. You're not killing that cash cow. You know, we're gonna control the faces. They were really tight when it came to that stuff. But Shooter, regardless of what you may think of him, there was like a bunch of change at that point, and he was not necessarily reigning like, no, we got to, come over and do this. He did play the numbers with it. He saw, he wasn't going to try to kill anything that was working. I think the biggest, but even then, that's still kind of pre-Secret Wars, and there is some legitimacy to Shooter believing that he knew what was best for these characters, and none of these other guys knew what was best for these characters. And plus, if you heard the stuff, he would just, I didn't know if he was just like taking shots, giving these guys a hard time, but he'd go to the cons and be like, here, look at this art. That'd be somebody like, it could be Byrne, Cockrum, it could have been any of these guys where everybody loved it. Terry Austin inking on it too. And he'd be like, here, look at this page. You see this? Yeah, it's all wrong. All wrong. Tear the piece up in front of everybody. It gets back to these guys. Like, he did what? He did what? And then you say, okay, fine. If you want to talk about him being blacklisted, it's like, you know what? Maybe once bitten, twice shy. Like, why not? I've worked with this guy before. I don't necessarily want to do that again. But look, I heard about this guy working with other people. I don't necessarily want to work with him at the same day. That's very akin to what, Dan Didio was at DC for the longest time. He was there for a while. And eventually he gets marched out by some of the same guys he brought in because they were like, no, there's too much micromanagement. I just want to do this. I don't want somebody over my shoulder half the time. And he's out. And he's out at the end of the day. And then Jim Lee wakes up from a 4-day nap and he's like, what the hell?
All right, dude, we're not going to Jim Lee. But look, what I'm trying to say is that there were definitely some good things. Yes, I hear what you're saying. But I think creators getting them more royalties for some of the characters that they created, I'm trying to say right? Also, what he created, what was the Marvel imprint that he created for creating
the new universe? No, you're talking about Epic. Sorry, you're talking about
Epic. So that too, and let's not also forget that he was the guy who supported the comic book stores. He got rid of the whole newsstand.
That wasn't necessarily a good idea, but okay.
He didn't get rid of the newsstands. He did sort of. Like when the X-Men was #1 in the stores, he would say the X-Men were #1 when, as far as their newsstand, which at that point was a bigger distribution, the X-Men wasn't #1. It equaled out at some point later, but ultimately he would promote the comic stores, but he didn't necessarily kick the newsstand to the curb. He would never have done that. So, but ultimately the thing is, like we read
the numbers of the newsstands were always a little iffy because there's always the possibility of them returning the comics, right? So
he didn't have a problem with the newsstand because the thing was the money was the money they were making, the successes of Marvel. There was a lot of successes of Marvel, so it wasn't that he didn't have anything where he wanted to get rid of the newsstands.
I thought he was using the comic stores to.
He was a big comic store like promoting because at different points, like obviously Dazzler was the #1 in the comic stores. Same with X-Men. X-Men was #1 in the 70s in the comic stores before it was #1. The buzz was in the comic stores, but at that point it wasn't selling that much. So he was just a supporter, a big supporter.
Until you put Claremont and Byrne together for the X-Men.
Okay, the X-Men got hot, and at some point he turned around and said, put Dazzler in the book. So now Byrne and Claremont, whenever they go, they say, why did you guys not do anything with Dazzler? And they're like, we were just working on the book, and they said, add her, because mutants are hot. And they didn't even think it was them. They just said mutants are hot. They didn't really think, they didn't find out till they went to a con. They dragged Byrne to some con, and they were like, we have Jack Kirby and Joe Kubert, and we have who is it? Marv Wolfman, and we have John Byrne. Ah! And everyone lost it, and they realized, oh, he's hot.
Hot hand.
But ultimately we did the point I wanted to get out was that we did a video where Cal had read a passage from a memo from Shooter where he was kind of trying to say to the writers they should promote Secret Wars because it's selling so well since he doesn't have a letter column, and also kind of make your books more like Secret Wars to make them better, because he has a, you know, him being the doing better characterization instead of him just having all the cool characters in one book, and which always sells. That's what it was. The first sort of crossover, a big crossover.
I don't understand why anybody, you know, I mean, Shooter on one hand for thinking that, you know, okay, I got this right, and then other people for taking over the whole thing. But you know, that's as old as the Justice League of America. Let's take all these characters, throw them in one book. Yeah, it's everybody's there at the end of the day, and that was Secret Wars. And you had a whole bunch of again, that's the first experience for a number of kids who were coming into comics. They were reading that book. You know, they weren't reading the other stuff. It's almost the same thing with Injustice: Gods Among Us, where that was incredibly popular. But guys were coming in reading that. They literally thought they were reading the real characters. They didn't think this was an alternative universe. They really thought Superman had killed the Joker. And they were like, oh, wow, this is great. This is what these characters are. Oh, I thought they were different. I thought this, that, and the other. I didn't think Batman and Superman were fighting each other. They're not. Okay, but that was for a lot of it. Now, if DC were to come and say, wow, this is really selling, you know what we need to do? We got to get Superman to start killing some more of these villains in the regular book. Like, what are you doing? No, you can't do that. You know, that's not going to happen. And then with, you know, Shooter, you know, it became more of a, well, I'm going to follow these numbers. You know, I'm a guy like that. Hey, look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. The numbers are right. That means everything I'm doing is correct and you should follow me. No, you got to look at the other context with it as well, especially since the book was made to sell toys.
Which it was selling, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sold. It sold a lot. It was, but the only thing was it sold a lot, and it also kind of took away from the other sales of other books, because the kids are just, it's the same money, but all of them went to Secret War. So I mean, ultimately, it gave the kids what they want. They want everybody in one book. And I'll one up you. The thing I complained about, even though people don't even remember that the Wasp kicked Magneto and the X-Men's behind, the Spider-Man beating up the X-Men is a popular move for the fans. So it really gave them something. If you like Spider-Man and X-Men is kicking their butt in sales, show them that, hey, this one guy could beat up all the X-Men, you know, or at least escape them, and have it in a way that but ultimately it's hard. Secret Wars is a book you can look at and say, well, why are there all these art corrections? People act like Mike Zeck is someone that needed to learn storytelling, and that's why there's all these changes and pages unused and this, that, and the other. When it's like, it's more Shooter. And then if Shooter's giving you kind of, I don't know if he gave him layouts at some point to follow, which is criminal. Like, this guy is a premier storyteller, you know, and to have to struggle with a writer, comic books work like this, right? And this is my opinion. Using Kirby as an example. You have the story and you have the artist, right? And sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. But most of the time you're trying to get the books done. So you look at Kirby's stuff, there'll be a lot of mistakes as far as not remembering things, or there's some things in there that you didn't ask for, but he did differently. But you just move forward. You clean up the art, make sure all the characters look great, and you move forward. With what Secret Wars, he's like, no, you got to chop this, redo this page, redraw this, change that face, do that and the other. And it's just like, you know, Kirby and John Buscema would like turn it to John Romita, who was erasing stuff and not using pages. It's like saying, throw away the eraser. It's comics. Like,
so one of the reasons we keep talking about Secret Wars, because Secret Wars ends up being kind of the blueprint for what the big successful series will be going forward.
Yes.
The crossover series that a lot of the comics will start doing.
Mm-hmm.
You have Crisis, you would have the Infinity Wars,
Crisis predates Secret Wars.
Well, Crisis, but I'm saying, well, sorry, Secret Wars, you know, the Marvel, what we call Civil War.
Well, the idea of it did. With what's the name came out first. They've been trying to do it for years.
Yeah, but Crisis clean up a whole bunch of stuff. So that was one thing. But the point is that is a success, that's for Marvel, and it helped to set a particular format, a template that they could use going forward. And this is one of the reasons with him being so successful with this. And he was able to release another Secret Wars series right afterwards, right?
Secret Wars 2, which was successful. Everyone hates it. It was successful. Yeah. And he also rejected an entirely drawn comic book by Sal Buscema. and entirely the first issue was shelved.
Wait, why did Shooter have to write the comic himself? Why did he have to do Secret Wars himself? Why didn't
He
someone else?
said that he couldn't. He said that everyone would be arguing with Byrne or Claremont or whoever got it. Everyone would hate. Then he said, "What? Just let them attack me rather than attack each other."
You don't think he saw that? Hey, this is going to be a big hit. Let me put my name on
Yeah,
it.
that would be the main reason why.
He was the only one who could tell that story.
Yeah, all the different properties. He's the only one who could do it. All right, so interesting. So, what is the T that you think he wants to drop? Let's get to the main issues. What is the T that we think he wants?
The same T he always drops.
Yeah, it hasn't been different. He's been saying the same stuff for what, the last 20 years?
But what is it?
He's going to say the same thing. He's going to say that he's the reason why the Dark Phoenix had to die. He's the guy. He hasn't.
It's true.
No, he's not. He's the reason why they killed him. He takes credit for actually killing her when they didn't. He didn't do it. He wanted her punished because they wanted to do a story where Jean would be a recurring villain. And it's almost as if Shooter remembered it while they were doing Phoenix the Untold story. The plan was that Phoenix was become a recurring villain, but he saw the end of the original story and he thought, oh, it's a happy ending. Oh, look, they've taken him home. Where Cyclops is mad at Lilandra. He says, haven't you done enough? And the X-Men leave them. And the next thing you know, she leaves. She's sent to her parents' house. But when they look at it like, oh, this is a happy end. This is a happy ending. Look at her. And then Chris Claremont kept talking about them getting married. But he was supposed to turn into Phoenix again. And Byrne and Claremont hadn't figured out, because they both had different ideas of what was going to happen. But the plan was her to be, and Shooter approved it. But when he saw it, it's like, oh, that's like Hitler. That's more than what Hitler did. She has to be punished. And they're like, well, we already got this plan. And you have to imagine they were planning to do a new set of like a New Mutant type of characters within the book. And he canceled that. He canceled a lot of stuff that they were doing. And then this was another thing that he already canceled. So they were like, what is he doing? So then next thing you know, they decided, all right, he's going to punish her. It's not going to work. So let's kill her. And they both agreed. And then they went in to Shooter. And Shooter's changed it to that they came to him trying to trick him, saying, hey, we'll kill her. And he said, yes. And they're like, no, you're crazy. And then Byrne said, what the F is wrong with him? That's his version of the story. So there's a lot of that going on. But he didn't say that when he was being interviewed with Byrne and Claremont, where Byrne and Claremont are both going back and forth, for both blaming it on each other and both taking credit, like that sort of thing. But they don't bring in Shooter as far as Shooter just having issue with it. That's what the thing was. So, I mean, at this time, there's also the big thing that we found out that he was kind of dragged into. I'm not sure if they're going to do it, but Cal, if you can read this thing. This is from Comic Book Resources. This is an interview that was done a while ago. Like, this is a very old interview.
Let's see what these guys got to say.
So here, if you can read this thing, this is going to lead to at least the DC side.
You want me to start with the MDT or the JS?
You already read the other part.
Anyway, MDT. What was it at DC that engendered so much animosity that you couldn't sell the Legion story? Was it Marvel people who defected? Jim Shooter. It was the fact that there were people there that I booted out. Sometime near the end of my tenure, I fired Denny O'Neil. I also fired Mark Carlin, which they richly deserved. I'm sorry. That line is just classic Shooter. Anyway, I also fired Mike Carlin, which they richly deserved. I had begged with Denny to not do what he was doing, and he persisted. The publisher said, get rid of this asshole. I said, Mike, you're right. He's gone. So we fired him, and he went over and got a job at DC. Maybe he cleaned up his act, and they seemed to be happy with him, and he seemed to have went on. I had a similar problem with Mike Carlin not doing his job and ultimately had to let him go. He caught on there and became a part of the power structure. A lot of things are done by committee there. And if my name is ever mentioned, there are people who would actively throw a fit if I did anything for DC.
Thank you. Did you understand what he said, Petey?
Yeah.
Well, you know what you know what he's referring to when he's talking to Denny O'Neil, though. Yes.
Which one? Which one? Do you give specific? What are you thinking?
When he's talking about cleaning up his act.
About the alcohol?
Yeah. That's probably. I think that's the only thing I could think of that he's referring to, because I mean it's established that Denny O'Neil had a drinking problem. I don't know how. See, that's the thing. I don't know how far it went. I don't know if it was drinking problem or he's just like a full-blown alcoholic. And I do believe there is a difference between the two of them. Because you can
think. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. So I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure about it. So, but I do know. I mean, Denny O'Neil himself is, spoken on it. So that might have been what led to his firing over at Marvel. Which is going to happen if your drinking is keeping you from being productive. You're going to get let go. Mike Carlin, however, is a different thing altogether. But they did both go to DC, and the power structure at DC over Marvel, because I've heard this from the people who worked there, that they felt, I mean, the guys who worked at Marvel, at least circa around that time, or Marvel period, just feel that Marvel's a more micromanaging place. And a lot of them have said that they get more freedom over at DC, which I thought it would have been the reverse.
Yeah, I would think the same thing.
When we interviewed Paris Cullins, I don't know if he said this there or when we were speaking to him afterwards, but he mentioned that. He said, no, when you would go into the urinals, you would go into the bathroom over at Marvel, they would have like in the urinal, they'd have like a picture of, I don't know if it was Shooter or whoever the editor was at the time, so they could relieve themselves, in more ways than one. And then he specifically said he went back to DC because he felt more respected there, more freedom to do this type of stuff. And I was shocked to hear that because, especially as a kid, you think Marvel's the one, oh yeah, fun, free, we're all marching with Stan. And these guys are like, no, too rigid over here. Mm. Especially when you look at, who was it? Was it Larry Hama? And he was saying, yeah, I got to Marvel and I was looking at the whole thing with the Marvel method of doing these comics. And I looked at this and I was like, man, this is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was only going to add that the thing is you have to. It's what people have kind of said. One of the things that, since Denny O'Neil is writer of Batman, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, used to work for Marvel. Like when he went to Marvel as an editor. Like these top guys wanted to work with him, which is Byrne, Miller, and Denny O'Neil's one of the guys who made the decision to allow Frank to write it, where the writer and Frank Miller were at odds, and he said they even say that the Daredevil was still kind of struggling as far as sales. I'm not sure about that, but ultimately he made the decision that Frank Miller can write it because he wanted to write at that point, and it, of course, paid dividends, right? So ultimately, I think Byrne pointed out that Denny said, "Don't tell anybody that I don't change anything when I edit you guys, because I get a lot of flack for not making a lot of changes on you guys' work." And if you read From the Den in Marvel, in the Alpha Flight letter page, it's almost as if he's reading the book like a fan. Like he's like saying, oh, I read this, like the last 3 issues, which is big surprises. And he's like, wait till you see the next issue. And then when he comes to 27, he's like, sometimes I don't know what I'm getting when Byrne says, here's the book. And then next thing you know, it's like, I was surprised as much as you guys. And then he said in the last issue, it's almost his love letter goodbye to a character Byrne created. He's like, oh, I'm going to miss Heather from this book. Hopefully Heather can come over to the Hulk at some point. I was like, you see, I think Shooter said at the point he was letting Byrne get away with stuff. But I think Byrne had pointed out that that Denny had said to both Frank Miller and Byrne to not say that he wasn't changing a lot of stuff with their work, that he was kind of like he didn't really see too much fault in what was going on. He was just like, basic comic stuff.
That'll get you fired.
So, and Shooter was like, oh, he's letting Byrne get away with everything. So then there's the classic all splash pages Hulk that Byrne did, and I'm gonna do a phony reenactment. So say this is the book, right? So then Byrne comes in and he says, and Shooter and Danny O'Neill looks and is like, all splash pages, and he's like, you didn't tell us beforehand. He said, just put it on the shelf, right? And so Shooter says that Danny O'Neill actually rejected it, which he didn't. Byrne said he put it on the shelf because he was so gun shy that Shooter was going to flip out that this book was all splash pages and it went through the editorial to say, even though the story, the plot was approved, but it's saying all splash pages, Shooter's going to lose it. So Byrne ultimately was like, left the hope. That was announced, but he said that Shooter says that Byrne went to the president, was it Jim Gatlin, and said, I want Shooter fired. And then they said, who's John Byrne? And then John Byrne left. John Byrne didn't actually leave until later in the Fantastic Four. So Byrne's side of the story was that the book was shelved. And then like a little while later, after Byrne was gone, they had this book and they said, hey, look, there's all this Byrne issues. And he then approved it and put it into Marvel Fanfare. And then, of course, Byrne got a little more money because it was printed on on better paper. So he got a little more money for it. So, but it's one of those things where the book was actually shelved, not rejected, as Shooter had said. So it's one of those things where Mike Carlin, Byrne said, I don't know enough about it. Byrne just said that Mike Carlin was getting it while Byrne was there. And then next thing when Byrne left, they said, why? He said, why did they fire Mike Carlin? Because Byrne left. That was it. Like that was the only thing he got from the editorial. So those guys became quality editors like Denny O'Neill. I can't say he wasn't. He did have a drinking problem, as Cal said. So, and he
wait. Let's not even bring in the drinking problem.
You got to bring that in because because look at what Petey's saying. Petey's saying, okay, that this guy Denny O'Neill was coming over here and he's subverting what Shooter's telling him to do, and that's part of the reason why he gets cut out. However, look, when that's like slang right there, or innuendo when you say, somebody cleaned up his act. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how am I supposed to read that? Am I supposed to read that dude, this guy was over here, this guy was imbibing too much and that affected his performance, or is it what Petey said? So unfortunately, you have to say both because of the language that he's using right there, which may be purposely done. So unfortunately, it's no slate against Denny O'Neill. Denny O'Neill.
I think there's a lot of slate when you say things like that.
Denny O'Neill was very public with his challenges with drinking. Okay, but in what Shooter's saying right there, because he's not being definitive as to whatever the reasons were. Clean up your act. That's been slang for, hey, get it together in terms of your drinking or your drug use or what have you. It's right there. So I don't know do you know exactly what he means by that? So if we're going to be, if we're going to at the very least, be thorough with it, that has to be brought in. Sad to say.
This is inspiration for his Iron Man run, where Tony Stark falls off the wagon, and he ultimately. I kind of dropped out, but when Tony Stark came back, I was right there. I was like, I wanted him to stay in his original armor. I was like, yes, finally, he was doing this style that, and you can see a lot of other people try to do that style of doing classic sort of Marvel. But ultimately, these guys became titans at DC. Yeah, like Superman became like the Carlini team, and Denny O'Neill, with the success of the movie, and then next thing you had a bunch of Batman titles released. Batman got the family after Denny O'Neill and DC got rid of the Batman family. Denny O'Neill brought back the Batman family. People he fired, he brought back. The things were selling like hotcakes. He had a bunch of stories under his byline, so the books were moving. And then he was followed. Ultimately, hey, the Superman books were getting hot. He followed that sort of format for a little while. He didn't stick with it, but he did follow that format. Follow the breaking the back sort of thing. And Superman
wise enough to realize it didn't work for Batman.
They almost did the reveal of Superman revealed his identity to Lois Lane. Batman almost revealed his identity too.
Just using that logic is that Denny O'Neill basically spent his whole life in the comic book industry, right?
Yep.
He stayed once he stopped being editor of DC. He became the guy who was in charge of Batman stuff, right?
And then after he left Marvel, he became
No,
the editor.
DC, yeah. So I mean, I'm saying that it shows that he got along well with people. I assume.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was successful, whereas Shooter was successful, but he was a little bit rougher on the edges, compared to him. Because basically, once he left Marvel, he was basically he was doing smaller projects. He was doing Valiant, he was doing Dark Horse, he was doing Defiant. He wasn't back to the big boys. Like Denny O'Neil leaves, and he goes to he returns to DC, or he returns to, what I'm trying to say. So
Valiant was like Image done right, even though it wasn't visually as strong as the Image books. It was at least solid stories. Like I had the first one, the Magna Zero that Paris Cullins did. And my only issue was that Paris Cullins didn't go and continue doing the book. But I mean, it's just like, ultimately those books were, they did some crossovers with Image. They got a Jim Lee cover. They were doing sort of the right things to keep a buzz. So like, I think had he not been ousted, and I'm not sure that it would have survived the comic crash, but Valiant went through so many changes, got sold a couple times, got Dan Jurgens was doing it. They had a different editor-in-chief and Fabian Essenza. So it's like those things through the turmoil of the times, we can't even say if it was a healthy market, not a specular market, what those books would have done. So, I mean, I'm not going to, but I'm going to give him his credit for Valiant. Everything after that was kind of wishy-washy. So let's get to the present day. We already established that there were people at DC that stopped him from doing his last Legion story, right? So ultimately, and this is going to lead to what you asked, right? About what happened after he left, right? So ultimately, there was a time, you can say maybe because Mike Carlin was moving somewhere else and Denny O'Neil was not doing Batman, we finally got Jim Shooter on the Legion. It wasn't a big thing. He did like, I think 9 or 10 issues, and then he left. But he also had his website at the same time where he would critique comic books. As Cal was saying, he'd point out bad storytelling. So after he left the Legion of Superheroes and ended his time there, he did a blog about his last issue, pointing out, saying, "Hey, Francis was at Manapul. He's going to be a great artist when he learns the basics. Like he's got some good energy. But he went through the issue. I asked for a wide shot, and here is a medium wide shot. And this would have worked better if he had done this. Like he went through the entire issue, critiquing the artist that worked on the book. And in comics, like you're only as good as, same in Hollywood, you're only as good as the people that you're connected with. And that's how these artist-writer teams have worked with people over the years. This is how, what's the name? Like Byrne had some loose connection with Mike Mignola. That's how Mike Mignola had Byrne script the first Hellboy comic books. You have Paul Gulacy and Doug Mensch. They work on the Master of Kung Fu, and then they did a bunch of books over the time. They're both pulling each other over. Hey, I want to do an epic book. Can you write this for me? I got these ideas. Like that sort of relationship, which keeps you in the business when you're not the hot writer anymore. Then someone's dragging you back, and sometimes you're like having that connection. Like using Mensch is the best one because he has a connection with Kelly Jones. So he turns to Kelly Jones and says, "Hey, you're doing these covers like this issue of Batman. They blew away all of your all your Sandman books." And then they kept doing work. Making these friendships, because he had friendships with Byrne, Miller, this, that, and the other, these guys, and keeping those friendships of having someone who will say, "You know what, I want to pull Jim Shooter in." And ultimately, he did have some connection with like Rob Liefeld wanted them write. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see if he was able to write. What's that book? Youngblood. Rob Liefeld wanted to do Youngblood, but that book never came out. There was a couple of Youngbloods that never came out. The Kurt Busiek Youngblood. What's the name? Sort of came out, the Youngblood Genesis with Mark Miller. That sort of came out way later than it was supposed to, but ultimately he didn't have any connections with anybody. Someone to turn around and say, hey, I want Shooter, and someone push back and say, no, I want to work with them on this. And then leave the book without complaining about the artist or saying what could they've done to do better. Because that's why I use Kirby as an example. At some point, it's just trying to get the anatomy, like you can just look at some of the early artists in the time. As long as the books were coming out and they looked okay, and these artists had these deficiencies, the more important point was to get these books out. And that's where Shooter at one point was. But now it's like, hey, I asked you for a wide shot and you did a close up. This is wrong. Like, you can't do this. And he would continually ask for a lot of wide shots all the time, so ultimately
it's the precursor. They didn't have a term for it at that time, but it's the precursor to micromanagement.
Yes.
And then, nobody wants to be, especially in the creative aspect, most guys do not want to be micromanaged at all, especially since the majority of them are professionals. And as a writer, you realize that when you're putting these scripts together, you want the artist to have enough room to actually draw and not to be literally in lockstep with every single thing on the page. If that was the case, they would, if you had to do everything that Alan Moore put into a script, you'd never be done with that amount of detail at the end of the day. So really trying to make certain that the pertinent things are there. And if, you can convey it with a medium shot as opposed to a wide shot, good editor is supposed to say, okay, this still works, as opposed to, no, do what the hell I tell you to do. That's, just not, it's not good long-term. But it's Shooter. Even when I was giggling at that part where, he's saying, they got fired, which they richly deserved. See, that part isn't necessary. The traditional thing is you said, look, things weren't working out. And so, I had to let him go. And that's it. That's it. You pretty much leave him there. But the other part where I'm going to get this little stick in right over here. I'm going to get this piece. That's where you may have trouble with guys later on. Even though Shooter has never struck me as the type of person who's like, man, I wish I'd been nicer to people so I could get back in there. He still seems like fuck him.
Well, there's also the idea that if you look at the X-Men, I can take away credit from him not putting Byrne and Claremont together for the initial success, but you can give him for X-Men Micronauts, X-Men Titans, X-Men Alpha Flight, X-Men in Asgard. They were like two sets of miniseries in Asgard, like forcing the issue. And a lot of those stories, even the X-Titans was Shooter going to Byrne is like, will you do X-Men Titans? Byrne, no. Will you do X-Men Alpha Flight? Okay, yeah. But don't put Kitty in it. Why is Kitty in it? So it's like at that time he's thinking of maximum money. Let's get Byrne and Claremont back together, even though Byrne said, no, I'm not, we're not working together anymore. And he's like, let's push them back. I want to see if we can get that money that, get the maximum amount of money. So he was constantly, and the thing is what you had John Romita talk about, I think, and Byrne agrees, like Shooter enjoyed spending Marvel's money. So when they had, I think Byrne did the blank pages issue, just layouts of the panels of Alpha Flight, and Shooter paid him for those issues, saying that was an artistic decision. And even though there was layouts, he's like, you're still getting paid for that. So, it was a good period, and then there was this other time. The only problem is that if you listen, there's an 8 hour with a part 2 interview with Shooter, and you can go through it. And then I didn't want to drag this team into doing a thing where I flip out on everything Shooter says and say, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It's like, because he, a lot of things he talk about.
Trying to be positive with Shooter, try to show some positive things, and you shot down several of those things. So
I was hoping, I bought him doing the Justice League. I like Francis Manapul. He became a big guy at DC. Like, yeah, there might be some issues with, but this guy's become a Titan. What happens when he became a Titan and say, you know what? I think we should bring in Shooter instead of saying, hey, this guy trashed me. Now I won't, I don't want to work with him ever again. like that sort of thing. That's what I mean.
So in the end run, basically, what you're just saying is that he was, and I think Cal, you've said it before, that this guy was just a micromanager, and
that's the best way.
Kind of pushed a lot of people out that way.
And
so
it's
that
what
made it difficult for him to come back into the industry. That's why he had to go on his own. Whereas Denny O'Neil, seemed to have gotten along with a lot of people, was also successful, but being able to create type of thing.
It's a different dynamic with Denny O'Neil and DC was always, the one thing I do have to say with Shooter is that he must have really cheesed off some people, because DC is usually one of the places where if things don't necessarily work out other places, DC will usually, hey, yeah, you can come back, we'll get something for you. Marvel wasn't always like that. I don't know if Marvel's like that today, but DC was to the point where like, all right, yeah, no problem. We can, get you some covers. We can get you some of this. You have to really, really work hard to get no work out of DC at the end of the day. Alan Davis, I don't know if Alan Davis has done anything for Marvel recently, but I know he still is able to get covers and some work over there with DC. DC, that type of thing has usually been open. I mean, Neil Adams does almost all, I haven't seen him do anything for Marvel in years, but he still does covers for DC. He'll get a series for DC, that type of stuff. So DC always had, at the very least, in terms of especially the people who have made their bones over there, did some good work. You can come back. So I wasn't surprised to hear that Denny O'Neil was able to come back. Mike Carlin is a different situation. But the fact that Jim Shooter's Legion of Superheroes run is pretty much the run that most people would talk about. Even like somebody like Jeff Johns refers to it in his own stuff when he's doing the Legion with seminal storytelling, and nobody wants this guy. Nobody's saying, hey, let's get Jim Shooter back. Everybody's like, no, absolutely not. Let's keep that guy far away. You're like, well, just let him come over here and do a little stuff. Maybe you can do this, do that. And you realize, okay, there's more so than I'm able to put a finger on. There's something there. And it's on, I got to say, largely it's going to be, Jim Shooter is the one commonality in all of it. So largely it's going to be on Shooter. And then, of course, whatever, sometimes people are petty, sometimes people just like, no, once bitten, twice shy, that sort of thing. But the major commonality is Jim Shooter.
Okay. So I guess, we can wrap it up there. Is there anything else before we go?
Was for toys. So nobody should look at that series as, oh, these were the Marvel characters done right. No, those are for toys. Those were toys done right. Those were the toys. The toys. Think of that as an alternative universe story. Okay, those are not the actual characters. Never forget this.
Yeah, that's I would say. I would add on to that it's hard that the fact that all these books are successes. Thor became a success again. FF was a success. But even the Hulk with the mind of Bruce Banner was a success, and the X-Men were a big success. And ultimately, the core of his storytelling was Cap is the lead, Spider-Man is your Michael Jordan of the Thing. And then the Thing will have moments, but he'll have sort of performance anxiety where it keeps changing back and forth. So you had this thing of those three, and then some other character. Wolverine. The hard part is that he just didn't stick with the characterization that was going on in the other books. So if you looked at Thor was someone who, even before Simonson had got on the book, had kind of, was still going to stay on Earth and help people out. That was the plan. And then in Simonson run, it kept that, right? And he wanted even though he wasn't Don Blake, he wanted to interact with humans, and he got a regular job. When he gets on Secret Wars, in the first 2 seconds, he's like, I can't hang out with these mortals. Let me find Amora. Like, we've been around, like, you've been with the Avengers all the time. Why do you decide that you're going to guilt Amora, the Enchantress, into, I don't know what his plan was, but he wanted to guilt her in the sun because he's out there causing a storm and all this other stuff. He just don't want to hang out with the humans. It's just like, you're dealing with him as an Asgardian. The Asgardians can't deal with mortals. And Simonson kept that thread that all of them are like, thou art mortal, and, like, you kind of, basically, if you die, you're not going to be here that long, that sort of thing. And Thor, cared for his friends, this, that, and the other, and Shooter was just like, no, he don't want to hang out with the Avengers. Same with the Fantastic Four. There's years, even discounting Byrne, like before that, Reed, Sue's pregnant, Reed, Ben, and Johnny are going out having adventures, and he's not stopping and saying, "Oh my God, my wife's pregnant. I need to be home with her." In Secret Wars, that's all he says the entire time.
Well,
So
thanks.
he's not keeping in with the characterization that was going on with the talent that he's sort of supporting, and he's not going even with the classic. He's going what we would think, that Reed's a science officer, not a man of action, that Johnny's a complete douchebag, the entire Secret Wars, that the Hulk is just someone that is supposed to be someone who gets angry he gets, the stronger he gets. He's angry a lot in this series, but he only gets to use his strength on one thing. Otherwise, he gets knocked around by a robot. He can't really do much, but his leg gets broke. So it's one of those things. And the X-Men just are this team of teamwork, but they don't got any teamwork when it comes to the people they're fighting until they fight the villains. And even then, they're not a part of inclusion. They're a part of separating from the humans, where the book is always a bit about them connecting with humans. And in this story, Xavier's like, we need to join Magneto and not be with the other heroes. And it's just like, that's totally against it. So, what, you're saying I'm going too far complaining about this? I should just say how great the Legion of Superheroes was. His initial Avengers run was very good. The Bride of Ultron, the Korvac saga,
Death of Pharaoh. That's probably one of the best.
Death of Pharaoh. That's probably classic stuff he did.
That's probably one of the. No, I won't go that far. But that's one of the best Legion of Superhero stories that you have. And then, I mean, Korvac, all that stuff is great stuff. But again, and this is a comic book guy thing. Most guys think where they came in, that's the best period of comics. That's the best comic ever. And it's not necessarily the case. It was popular, but it's not necessarily the best stuff that this guy even wrote at the end of the day. Okay, but they followed the numbers.
Well, thanks, Cal. So I guess we'll leave it at that. I mean, we hope we've given a full overview of Jim Shooter and what his strengths and weaknesses and what we expect to happen in the Heavy Metal magazine. And hopefully,
if we didn't, we'll be back.
And hopefully this will give you some type of background in your
We'll definitely be back to deal with that interview.
Spinnerack
out.